Hello, everyone, and welcome. It's Shanna. I'm so glad you're here today. Today, we're working with the not too shabby Spring Blessings, and I have got the Cross Stencil here, and we're going to use it. And we're going to use the Spring Blessings pattern paper and the ephemera, and I've got the stamp set here too. I don't wind up pulling this into our two cards that we do today. But I will use some of the Springtime Blessings pattern paper and that stencil. And we're also going to pull in Kendra's Card Challenge. And we're going to do sketches 1 and 2. And these have circles on them. And so we're going to create some stenciling for our background for our first one and for our circles for our second one. So I've just chosen some purple cardstock to go with this piece of ephemera here that is in a circle. I was thinking it would work well for the circle on the sketch 1. And then I've got a strip of cardstock here that was left over from the last card I made that I thought I would bring in. Excuse me, my voice is a little bit scratchy. Anyway, so I've got some purple, I've got the stencil. We're going to bring in some ink. And this is a 6x6 stencil. I've got an A2 size panel. And I'm just going to lay it on there. Now you can, the cross is on the diagonal, but you could certainly turn it in the direction to make the cross be, kind of upright if you wanted to do that. I'm just going to bring in some best ever craft tape, and I'm going to bring in ground espresso and my blending brush and just lay some ink down on here. I have sped this up because it does take a bit of time to stencil. And we're just going to get some color laid down on here. And this is actually going to be our background panel. And for the, I guess the areas of pattern paper on the sketch, we're going to use the ephemera, and I'm going to bring in some additional circle layers for it. So just getting lots of ink down on here. Now, I had envisioned a little different look here. This is pretty dark. I think it would have been prettier if I'd used a softer purple, a lighter purple. But we're going to run with it. I think it's going to come together. And I'm just going to cut it down. The sketch does call for you to trim it down a little bit. So I'm going to do that here. And I'm going to use a cream colored card base. I am going to use that for my bottom layer. I'm going to let the card base be the layer and not bring in another piece of paper. So we'll have a nice little cream frame around our At the Cross stenciled cardstock. And I'm just going to glue it straight down on there. Just going to bring in my Barely Art glue and get it laid down on there. And then we'll begin building our card. And as I said, this is sketch 1 for Kendra's Card Challenge. And it's really handy when you've got a great pattern paper, an ephemera set, and then you've got a card sketch. It makes card making super easy and fast. So I've got this strip here from the last card that I made using this Spring Blessings set. And I brought in another panel thinking that I'm going to use it to die cut a circle because I'm thinking I want more layers than what I've got there. And so I'm going to start with this brown and layer it up. And then I'm going to look at it and recognize that I probably am going to want another layer on there. So I'll get this glued down and we'll kind of look at it and see. And then we'll wind up bringing in another layer. And so we've got our cross, and we've got basically we have our sentiment on the card. Only you, Lord, are my help and my refuge. And then the sketch calls for a sentiment strip. So I've got the strip laid down there, and basically what I'm going to do is just bring in some pattern paper from the Spring Blessings and lay it on some of that cream cardstock, and we're just going to make like a kind of like a little banner down there. And I brought in that extra layer of cream, and I think that really helps with the dark background panel. And so I'm going to bring some more brown in because we've got some pattern paper in this set that has a brown and gold stripe. And I think it looks pretty, and it helps to tie everything in with the cream and then some more brown. And I decided to go ahead and fishtail these and make them a fishtailed banner. Now, the sketch doesn't call for that. It just calls for a straight rectangle banner, but I thought this would add some extra interest to it, and I'm just trying to kind of jazz it up a little bit. So I'm going to get this laid down on there. The sketch shows it kind I'm laying on the bottom of the circle, but I'm just going to go below it because I'm kind of modifying the sketch. That's one of the great things about Kinder's Card Challenges. You can rotate and flip the card sketches. You can change elements, use different shapes, use larger mats. You just are encouraged to make it your own. I'm going to bring in another piece of ephemera. I thought it looked nice because we've got a lot of florals on our circle there. And that's going to finish it off. So there's sketch one with our Spring Blessings. Now we're going to use that stencil again, and I am bringing in a lavender. This is milled lavender distress oxide, and I'm going to lay it on the cream, and I really like how this turns out. Now what I'm doing here is I'm creating my pattern paper for my circles on sketch 2. And instead of using our pattern paper, I'm going to use the stencil. And I think this one comes out really pretty. I'm really pleased with it. You can see I've got a little over blending on there, but I don't care. It's going to work out fine. I'm just going to line the stencil up and do the bottom of this because I'm going to cut 3 circles out of this. I felt like I needed a little bit more room for that. So I'm just going to get it blended, and we've got our dust cleaned up, and now we're ready to start die cutting out our circles and adding those elements to our card. So here's our circles, and we're going to have 3 of them. I think you could probably split one in half and use it, the smaller one, but I didn't choose to do that because I wanted to be specific about how I laid them on there. So I'm just going to find a good spot to lay these dies on there. We'll die cut these 2 out, and then we'll go ahead and die cut a 3rd one out, and we will have 3 circles that we can work with as we are assembling our card. So here's our first 2, and then we'll just go back to the die cutting machine and die cut out another one, and then we'll have 3, and we can use those. Like I said, I think we probably could have split one in half and done it that way, but I didn't choose to do it that way. So I'm going to pick out some pattern paper for this. This was my first instinct, and I grabbed it and I thought, well, let's pull in the rest of the paper pad and just kind of look at them and see what things might go with it. And so I'm just kind of eyeballing it. The blue could be nice, but I laid it there on the purple, and I thought that is what I had in mind was the purple butterflies. And so we're just going to use it, and it is going to be our base layer for our card. So we will bring the trimmer in, and we're going to cut it down. Now this is, the pattern paper here is actually, that I'm using here is actually just a base layer, and it doesn't actually call for one from the cutting guide. It is just an extra layer. And the pattern paper specifically that the cutting guide is referring to is the 3 circles. And they're all out of the same pattern paper. So it does work out that I did the cross stenciling and created that pattern paper for this, so that it does kind of match the guide. So anyway, so this is generally how I'm going to lay them down on here. I'll move them around a little bit. We'll just add some glue. I intentionally did not lay my butterfly pattern paper on my card base yet because I want to be able to cut these off the sides before I lay it down on there. So we'll get some glue on here, and we'll get it lined up on our base panel there. And that's just under an A2 size, that panel there is. And then we're going to get all 3 of these laid down, and then we'll just flip it over, bring in the big scissors, and cut it off. So we are having an absolutely fantastic weather day here in Indiana. We finally gotten rid of our snow for the most part. There might be a little remnant here and there. I don't think we really have any around our yard, but there may be some places where they piled it fairly high from the amount of snow that we have had, and it'll take that a while to melt, but our temperatures are way up there. I think we today actually I think had maybe a high of 60 or a little bit above, which is uncalled for in February for Indiana, but we'll take it. We've had kind of a rough winter, so it's nice to have a little relief from it. So just a great day. There's been a lot of people out walking around the last few days, I've noticed, and that is encouraging. So here we go. We've got our cream card base, and we're just going to let it be the frame around this purple butterfly panel, and then we've got our crosses. And I really like this card. I am thrilled to have gotten to work with this set because I just love it. I love the sentiments and the ephemera, and just everything about it. It just speaks to me. So I'm going to get this laid down on here nice and neat, try and move it around and get a nice little frame on there. And there we go. We've basically got the sketch minus the sentiment there at the bottom. And I think it looks pretty good. So I got this little strip of purple patterned paper that was left from one of my other cards, and I was thinking I'll just take some of this cream cardstock and trim it down. This particular sketch does have 2 strips, and so I'm going to cut them down to the size that the sketch is calling for and layer them up. And then they actually have the sentiment on these strips, but I'm not going to put the sentiment on here because I'm going to bring in some ephemera that is going to contain our sentiment, and so we won't need to put a sentiment on this, but we're going to use this for a decorative element and just kind of another feature of our card. So I'm just cutting it down according to the sketch guide, and we're just using scraps. Love to use those scraps up and get them glued down on, my cards. And so we're just going to layer these up, and we're just going to have a little cream frame around our little lighter, kind of a lavender pattern paper here. And it matches my crosses. Sorry for my little hesitation there. I'd gotten a text from my sister, and I just paused and was looking at it. So anyway. So I'm going to bring in some foam tape and just pop this up. I had a couple strips I had laying on my little side desk, and I was like, I need to just use these up. So I'm going to use one of them. I cut it in half, and I just had 2 pieces on there, and so I've used one of them, and we'll have another one for another card that we're going to use. So I've got that laid down on here. Now we're going to go to our ephemera. I have found this heart that has some floral on there, and it's got that lavender on it, and it says, Christ is my Savior. And I think this is the perfect piece of ephemera to add to it. So we're going to bring in some foam tape. I'm just going to bring in a small piece, and we're going to pop this up and just kind of layer it over our little stenciled circles. So we'll get this laid down there. Isn't that pretty? I just think that Distress Oxide that I used was perfect for the colors on this. I think it turned out really well. I like this one the most. I'm going to bring in, I've got some random enamel dots here, and I just had 2 large purple ones left that were kind of sparkly, and I thought they would look nice on here. So I'm just going to bring those 2 in. We're going to use them up. And I need to remember that I have pink and green here, and so that I can use these up and then just get rid of this. So we got those laid down on there. I think it's a nice little compliment to the card. And here we go. So we've got our 2 cards. Here's the first one with the darker purple. And then I love the more pale purple. I think it turned out really pretty. So thanks for watching. I've got some close-up shots of the cards so that you can check them out. And if you like them, consider hitting that like button. And if you haven't subscribed, I'd love to have you subscribe. Thanks for watching.